And this is Yaffee filling in for Bud. Bud will be back tomorrow. By the way, you can follow me on Twitter at Michael Yaffee, and you can follow the station on Twitter at WFLA Orlando.
And you can follow Melissa at MFox Radio.
Yeah.
2 X's.
Yeah, you can follow Melissa too. No, follow her as...
Follow me.
Well, so do we all remember a few years ago, at the beginning of the Obama administration, we had the economic crisis. The Great Recession was starting. Obama just got elected, and I believe he was his chief of staff at the time. Rahm Emanuel said something to the effect as, you can never let a good crisis go to waste. Well, I've noticed in the past few days that the Democrats seem to have that same approach now when it comes to the coronavirus. That it's gone beyond just saying, we need more funding for testing kits, we need the CDC more involved and stuff like that. No. It seems like liberal Democrats and those on the left really want to use this crisis. I'm putting crisis in scare quotes because...
Scare quotes or air quotes? Scare
Air
quotes. I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you might have termed something new there. Scare quotes. Yes, scare quotes. Yeah.
So, I'm not saying we shouldn't take coronavirus seriously, but to say it's an all-out crisis in our country right now, I think's a little too much. There's a little too much panic to some of this at the moment. We should take it seriously, but not panic. That's why I put that in scare quotes, as I just said. Yeah. But there seems to be some on the left who want to use this to promote, of course, a big government liberal agenda. Let me give you an example. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, she was on a late night with Seth Meyers last week. She was asked about Mike Pence, and who is now head of the coronavirus task force. And she says here why she believes Pence should not be in charge of that response.
A lot of people are discussing is who the president has chosen to put in charge of this task force. He chose Vice President Pence. Is it safe to assume that you do not think that's the best of his options?
No.
Yeah.
I think that we should have a person who believes in science.
Sure, that sounds good.
Ideally, what we have is a person who believes in universal health care and paid sick leave and an agenda that actually can help prevent the transmission of disease.
Ah, there it is. If we had Medicare for all, universal health care, and paid sick leave required by the government, we wouldn't even have coronavirus. Very interesting. So now, and I'm seeing this all over the place. More people on the left are using this to say, this is why we need Medicare for all. This is why we need universal health care. See, never let a good crisis go to waste. Now, someone else who said this over the weekend was Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut. He was on Face the Nation, basically echoed what AOC said.
So what we should be talking about right now are things like paid sick leave, putting the federal government in a position to be able to assist workers if they have to stay home to take care of a sick child or to quarantine themselves. Instead, we're talking about industry bailouts and tax cuts. We should be talking about assistance for average Americans, and that's not a conversation that's happening.
So there you go. He said basically the same thing. We need Medicare for all. We need universal health care. Does anyone else find it ironic that the same people who are calling for Medicare for all in response to coronavirus are the people criticizing the government's response to the coronavirus? So you believe that the government has failed in its response, but you want to give the government more power to respond to viruses by just basically taking over the healthcare system.
Michael, you just made my head go humana.
Exactly.
I'm serious.
I mean, they're trying to convince you of two different things. That the government is inept when they're responding to this, but then the government should be in charge of more things with universal health care. Really doesn't make sense, but I've noticed this. And he said as well, we need paid family sick leave. Now, I'm going to play a voice of reason on this in the next segment, who brings up a great point why maybe you don't want a top-down government healthcare system in the U.S. I'm also going to read some of this article that I teased just a minute ago. It's from the Wall Street Journal. It's an opinion piece by Jason Furman. He thinks that Congress should send every person $1,000 right now because of the coronavirus. Everyone just gets $1,000 right now to stimulate the economy. I'm going to tell you why that's flawed as well. And we have Orlando's news, weather, and traffic as well. In 2 minutes, this is Good Morning Orlando. I know a lot of people are really concerned about coronavirus and how it could spread and how it will affect the economy and how it will affect our daily lives. And you should be somewhat concerned about that, of course. But I'm also very, very concerned about the reaction to it, honestly. Not just what I mentioned, Medicare for all, the liberal agenda, big government agenda. But I mean, we got a text here, and you can text it 23680 as well. Someone said, did you see George Stephanopoulos on ABC yesterday? So condescending to Ben Carson. What does he want? Everyone to stay home? They want Trump's rallies to be canceled, but Bernie still has rallies. I noticed that on ABC yesterday as well that, Ben Carson was basically saying right now people just need to make individual decisions. That if you're elderly or you already have a pre-existing condition, don't go out in public as much. Think about what you're doing. And to the panel and to George Stephanopoulos, it wasn't good enough. They're like, well, what else should we do? There was almost a panic to it that we need to start closing down events, forcing people to stay home, all of this different stuff. And I'm like, whoa, people, hold on a minute here. For one, we're still a free country, and we can't panic and just shut down the country over something we're not 100% sure about yet. It might even have a lower death rate than originally thought. And Ben Carson was just being reasonable, and he got blasted for it. And I'm concerned about this. But like I said, there's a big push now for Medicare for all using the coronavirus fears. But a good voice of reason on this was Dr. Fauci. Alan Spector played a little bit of him at the top of the hour. He's the task force member, the coronavirus task force member, Dr. Anthony Fauci, also the director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. He was on Fox News yesterday talking about what delayed some of the testing in the beginning, but makes a point that kind of goes against the narrative that we need government control of our healthcare system.
The CDC made a test. There was a technical glitch there. The CDC provides tests for the public health groups in the state and local. What we really need to do now, which were the numbers that I mentioned to you, is to get the private sector involved so that you could literally flood it with millions and millions of tests. That is happening now. But, in fact, the American people need to realize that in the beginning there was a glitch, and we need to overcome that now.
So a couple of reasons I wanted to play his comment there. One, he says the reason why we haven't had enough test kits is not because of Trump and the lack of response from his administration. It's because there was a glitch initially by the CDC, which is very interesting. So he's not blaming Trump there. It was this glitch. The CDC had a test kit, but it didn't really work as well as they wanted. But the main reason is he said what we need now is a vibrant private sector to step up and help us in this situation. That goes against the whole narrative that the government should be in control of all this stuff. We still need a private sector, and the private sector is really stepping up and helping in this situation. But if we go down the road of nationalized health care, that could ruin that vibrant private sector that makes us so ready for these types of situations. So Melissa's giving me a lot of funny looks in there. What do you think about this?
My brain's going all over the place between funding removed from the CDC and then having to be given back. And I heard over the weekend about a guy back in the 80s who had this, he was working on coronavirus and they put it on the shelf and said, don't worry about it. I mean, I've heard so many different...
Well, there's a lot of different stuff out there. Funding was never actually removed. It was proposed in a budget to have some removing, but they said the really issue was on the state level. That's a lot of states are removing funding and stuff like that. Coronavirus itself is a pretty common virus,
yes,
but COVID-19 is not. COVID-19 is a novel form. So when you talk about testing for coronavirus back in the 80s, who knows which one that could have been.
And you'll see a lot of information about this out there on social media. Be very careful about what you believe.
Exactly. I didn't get into this article. Maybe I will later. Someone calling for every person to be sent $1,000 because of coronavirus and another $500 for each of your children to stimulate the economy.
Was that Andrew Yang who suggested that?
No, but it wouldn't have surprised me.
If Mike Bloomberg had redirected his money, we could have done that.
Yeah.
But the reason why I have a problem with that is it's not really demand's not the problem, or people not having the money isn't the problem. It's the fact that they don't want to go out and spend the money right now, and supply chain issues. So if we're sending everybody a bunch of money, they're still not going to go out and spend it because they're stuck at home out of fears of coronavirus or if they're quarantined and stuff. So it doesn't really solve the problem. They'll just put it in their savings and we'll have even more pent-up demand later.
Or they can go on Amazon, stay at home, go on Amazon and shop.
And hope the guy that boxes your stuff doesn't sneeze coronavirus in.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, a lot of people maybe don't even want to do that because they could be spread that way.
It's crazy. That's that scare quotes panic again.
Yeah. So I figured it was time to open up the Good Morning Orlando Florida file because there's important news coming out of Tallahassee, really, that I feel like you need to know. Now, some of it is coronavirus related, but there's some other stuff. I know. I know. People are probably sick of hearing it. But really the big issue, though, is teacher raises. It looks like there is some money going towards that, and affordable housing. There also might be some tax cuts coming. I'm reading here from the Orlando Sentinel. Says, even as lawmakers near a final deal on the state budget of about $92 billion, which is amazing, it's the biggest budget ever, legislative leaders are keeping an eye on how the global spread of the coronavirus, which has already led to cancellations of major events throughout the state, could disrupt the anticipated revenues needed for major items in the spending plan. This is always one of the problems of big government is it's dependent on revenues. And a lot of years, you have the revenues, and a lot of years you don't. And if you're spending too much too often, you're going to have those years where you're going to have a lot of debt. House Speaker Jose Olivia says it's a serious concern. It's a concern because we are making some strong spending commitments in areas that everyone can support, but they're strong recurring spending commitments. Now, here's the part I feel like you really needed to know because it's something we've talked about a lot on the show. Lawmakers on Saturday agreed on more than $500 million into teacher pay raises. Now, as you know, they can approve the funding, but a lot of that is up to the local school districts and so on and so forth. That would be a 3% across-the-board raise for state workers. That's part of this. And to preserve the full $387 million in Affordable Housing Trust Fund and set aside $50 million for Visit Florida, the state's tourism marketing arm. $50 million. I still think that's way too much money. I know that's like a bugaboo of mine, Visit Florida. I always complain about it because I can't believe how much we spend on that. And then, of course, there's Visit Orlando, which is even worse because that's just for the city, and we spend millions of dollars on that.
And it's like, what? We have nothing here, so that's why we have to promote it so you can come here because we have no reason for you to come here otherwise. You would never know that we are here.
Yeah, if we had if we didn't have Visit Florida or Visit Orlando, nobody would come to Orlando. Nobody would know about it. I mean,
Disney World. Really.
It's just ridiculous. But it's very interesting that a big push by Governor Ron DeSantis looks like it's going to be approved for the most part, $500 million into teacher pay raises. Now, that's less than originally was promoted by the Senate, but it's still something. So we'll see what happens there. But as I said, a lot of people in Florida government are concerned that coronavirus is just going to mess all this up because you're just not going to get the revenue involved. But a lot of money going to affordable housing and teacher raises. Speaking of Governor Ron DeSantis, though, our former governor, Rick Scott, seems like he's not too happy with how DeSantis is responding to the coronavirus. I think Rick Scott's being a little too cynical here, and I'll tell you why next. We have Orlando's news, weather, and traffic as well in 2 minutes on Good Morning Orlando. So interesting to see Rick Scott kind of in a backhanded way criticize Governor Ron DeSantis, and it really has to do with DeSantis' response to the coronavirus. And it's actually a pretty similar criticism to one that Bud Hedinger had about DeSantis last week. Has to do with information on coronavirus. Now, Rick Scott was on Fox News last week talking about, he learned about a case of coronavirus in Florida, and he responded that we found out too late. We didn't know about it until the person died in Lee County. Here's what Rick Scott had to say.
Here's the way I look at it, and I dealt with Zika when I was governor. I dealt with hurricanes. Prepare for the worst and hope for the best, but do everything you can to keep the public informed so they can make an informed decision. I was a little surprised. I was very surprised, actually, when I heard about the death in Lee County, which is adjoining to the county I live in. We didn't know there was even a presumptive case. We need to make sure, where did this person travel? We need to make sure if they were, they traveled into the airport, who was on that flight? Let's make sure they can get tested. But I think we need to do everything we can to get the public informed so they can make a good decision. We're all worried about our families. I get lots of phone calls from family members, from friends, from citizens. They want more information so they can make a good decision.
So, it wasn't a direct criticism of Governor DeSantis, but he's basically saying that we're not getting enough information from the governor's office on this stuff. And that was Bud's criticism last week, and I kind of took Bud to task because a couple people were saying that it seems like DeSantis is stonewalling on some of this stuff, maybe covering up some of this stuff. And Rick Scott was kind of going in that same direction, that he was like, when I was governor, you notice he threw that in there. When I was governor, we did this and this and this.
With Zika and hurricanes and...
kind of a backhanded way. Now, a DeSantis spokeswoman responded and said the hospital did not inform state officials on Thursday that the woman had died since she had not yet tested positive. She said they did not tell us prior to Friday that she was deceased. There is no protocol that requires it. So it seems, but Governor Ron DeSantis, or former Governor Rick Scott, now Senator Rick Scott, says he was surprised because he didn't even know about the case until after this person died. And he feels like the public really needed to know about this.
Michael, see, that's the thing. We don't have clear numbers. And instead of fogging the agenda and throwing out possibilities and this whole presumed... how can Governor DeSantis give us any information if he doesn't really have it? Again, we don't know how many people are testing positive. We don't even know how many people have actually been tested. A lot of people just have the flu or a cold or allergies. God forbid. If you don't have a fever, stay home, whatever. But, I just don't think that he has the numbers at his fingertip. He's not hiding them. He just doesn't have them.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, and that was kind of my take on all this. People are being really, really cynical when it comes to a lot of this. Governor Ron DeSantis didn't get out this information probably because the protocols aren't in place for him to know all of this. This is kind of a new thing we're dealing with. But when you see a lot of the speculation out there, when you hear a lot of the debate out there, there are people, they're acting like this is a cover-up or something. That Governor DeSantis knew about this and he's just not giving us the information that we need to know. And frankly, I don't really sense that here. I'm not sensing that Governor Ron DeSantis is part of some kind of big cover-up to get rid of the panic and not giving us the information we need to know because he's just trying to control all the information. I'm just really not sensing that here. I'm just thinking it seems like what his spokeswoman said was really just the honest reaction. We didn't know until after the fact, and we got out the information as soon as we knew. There are still not proper protocols in place. And like you said, Melissa, there's a lot of people that haven't been tested yet. They could be sick of other things. There's just, there's a lot that we don't know about this at the time. And I know everybody is acting like we should know everything right now because we're all afraid. And frankly, that's impossible. And welcome back to the Monday edition of Good Morning Orlando. This is Yaffee filling in for Bud. By the way, a reminder, if you miss any of the show, you can catch the podcast of Good Morning Orlando on the iHeartRadio app. Just go to the podcast section, search for Good Morning Orlando, and just go to our website, WFLAOrlando.com. And while you're there, make sure to catch my podcast, Beyond Reason Radio. I've been doing about 2 shows a week lately, so you want to check that out. Just search for Beyond Reason Radio. So in the latest poll on the Michigan Democratic presidential primary, which comes up tomorrow. Now, Bernie Sanders won this last year, or in 2016. Remember that. But as of right now, according to Mitchell Research, Biden is up by 21 points against Bernie Sanders in the latest poll in Michigan. That's pretty incredible. Biden has 54 points. Sanders has 33. So there you go. Now, that came out today. Now, Sanders said over the weekend he still thinks he can win Michigan because it was an upset in 2016. He thinks he'll be able to upset Biden again. We'll see if that happens. We'll have more from Bernie Sanders in a moment, but Sleepy Joe got another endorsement. It seems like the Democrats in the party are coalescing around Joe Biden. Kamala Harris put out a video where she said this. Are we?
Yeah, no, all of a sudden Kamala Harris took a dump for a second. There she is.
I just wanted you guys to know I have decided that I am, with great enthusiasm, going to endorse Joe Biden for President of the United States. I believe in Joe. I really believe in him, and I have known him for a long time. One of the things that we need right now is we need a leader who really does care about the people and who can therefore unify the people. And I believe Joe can do that. I am supporting Joe because I believe that he is a man who has lived his life with great dignity. He is a public servant who has always worked for the best of who we are as a nation, and we need that right now. There is so much at stake in this election, guys. So join me in supporting Joe, and let's get this done.
That was her enthusiastic
"Let's get this done"
endorsement.
I read everything on the paper.
Joe.
I read everything on the paper.
Please support Joe Biden. I'm very enthusiastic about it.
Known him for years. He's a great guy.
Yeah, so like I said, that endorsement was a little sleepy. Remember, it was Kamala's best moment was in a debate where she basically blasted Joe Biden almost as a racist, talking about his policies in the past dealing with school busing. So there you go. I just want to remind Kamala Harris, though, who she's endorsing. Here was Joe Biden, of course, with another big gaffe, this time in Missouri.
And turn this primary from a campaign that's about negative attacks into one about what we're for, because we cannot get reelect. We cannot win this reelection. Excuse me. We can only reelect Donald Trump.
So,
what?
Apparently he's running for reelection or something, and he had to think about. I mean, like I said, individually they don't seem that bad, but the fact that it's one after the other after the other,
one at every event. Yeah,
it seems like it's one at every event.
No, it is at least one. Sometimes 2 or 3.
I mean, no, that's who the Democrat Party's picked.
He's referenced people that he's worked with who've been dead for years. I mean,
it's not. Yeah,
it's not pretty, and it's not even funny anymore. It's sad.
It is. It's troubling, honestly, because this person could be president.
No, they won't. They're going to do the whole Article 25. So watch whoever they throw in the VP slot. That's the person they really want.
It's an interesting topic because Axios just put out a list of who Joe Biden probably will pick in his cabinet. I'll get to that later on.
Don't tell me Val Demings is on that list.
No, actually, she's not. I mean,
well, they floated the rumor this weekend that she was looking to be VP pick, or that they were looking at her.
I think they also floated the rumor that it's Amy Klobuchar, which I predicted last week might be the person. I think that's a good possibility. But I also want to play something here from Bernie Sanders, the person who's running against Joe Biden. He was on CNN State of the Union yesterday, and he was asked about Elizabeth Warren having to drop out. And does this prove that sexism is still in politics in America? Here's his answer.
Do you think that sexism and other forms of bigotry remain hurdles for candidates appealing for not just the general electorate, but for the Democratic votes?
Look, the short answer is yes, I do. I think women have obstacles placed in front of them that men do not have. On the other hand, we have made progress in the last 40, 50 years in terms of the number of women who are now in the Congress. And we have made some progress. But the day has got to come sooner and later that women can see themselves equally represented in Congress, a half or more of members of Congress, President of the United States, leaders of companies all over this country. We're making progress, but it's too slow, and we have got to get rid of all of the vestiges of sexism that exist in this country, which is still pretty rampant.
You know, Bernie, if you actually believe in all that, he says, there are major hurdles for women. Who are the major hurdles for women this time?
Old white guys.
Yeah, you, Bernie Sanders. You were one of the hurdles. You and Joe Biden.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
So if you think that, we need more women representation, it's time for women in politics, it's time for a woman president.
Step aside.
Exactly. Drop out. Seriously, if you believe that this is such a big issue and there's so much sexism and there are too many hurdles for women and we need to have more women in politics, you can change that. Get out of the race. Step aside if you actually believe that. I don't think they actually believe it. The reason why Elizabeth Warren lost is because she was not a good candidate.
She was, yeah.
Nothing to do with her gender or sex. But seriously, if they're going to promote that, if they really believe that, step aside. Enough. We've had enough old white men, Bernie Sanders. You need to get out and let a woman take the reins. Yeah, I don't notice how that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Very interesting. It's all the other white men that's the problem, not him. Mm-hmm. Not him. He's good. No. So we're going to continue this conversation in a moment. If you have a comment, you can call 407-916-5400 or give us a text at 23680. It's 7:19 right now on Good Morning Orlando. So my buddy Tom Benson just sent me this email I think you'll find interesting from Axios. They have a story here on who Joe Biden might pick for some cabinet positions. Looks like John Kerry might be a part of Joe Biden's cabinet. How old is John Kerry now? He's got to be up there. He's just, okay. Another old white guy, a part of Joe Biden's cabinet, possibly, is Mike Bloomberg. They want Bloomberg to possibly head the World Bank? What?
Kerry's 76.
Okay. Yeah, they want Kerry to take a new cabinet position devoted to climate change. Oh, joy. Another big government cabinet position coming. Sally Yates, they think might be a leading contender for Attorney General. This one, it would be a disaster. Senator Elizabeth Warren as Treasury Secretary.
Why bother? She wouldn't take it. It's beneath me.
Yeah, you're right. She probably will. Well, I don't know. Treasury Secretary Elizabeth Warren. Now, they also say the CEO and chairman of J.P. Morgan Chase, his name, Jamie Dimon, is being floated for Treasury Secretary. I'd be pretty surprised if that happened, honestly. Why in the world would he leave the job he has now? There's something that Bernie Sanders said yesterday on Fox News Sunday I wanted to play here because Chris Wallace actually challenged him on something and did a pretty good job of it, and Wallace was right, and Bernie Sanders really didn't have an answer. Here's Chris Wallace talking about Bernie Sanders' criticism of billionaires.
Here's something that you said last fall. I don't think billionaires should exist. First of all, a few billionaires, let's talk about Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, have created more than 1 million jobs, probably more than 1 million extra in terms of fallout as it goes from their companies, and created trillions of dollars of wealth. Why shouldn't they share in the wealth that they create, which is helping not just them, but has helped a lot of Americans.
Chris, I have nothing personal against any billionaire. But when you are looking at economy and an economy today where the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92%, where over the last 30 years, the top 1% has seen a $21 trillion increase in their wealth, while the bottom half of America has actually seen a decline, where real wages have essentially been stagnant for the last 45 years. Workers in America not making a nickel more in real dollars than they did 45 years ago. When you got 500,000 people sleeping out on the streets of America tonight, homeless, when the very, very rich are getting richer, when you got half of our people living paycheck to paycheck, 87 million people uninsured or underinsured, 45 million people dealing with student debt, young people can't afford to go to college. I'm in Michigan now, go to Detroit. You got a school district there which is inadequately funded. So we got to get our priorities right. That's what we have to do.
So Bernie Sanders pretty much had the same point he always makes and didn't really answer the question. I thought Chris Wallace made an excellent point. Yeah, someone like Bill Gates is a billionaire, makes billions of dollars. But his company and what he created has contributed trillions of dollars to the U.S. economy. So the percentage that Bill Gates gets is really a small percentage compared to what his company and what he did contributed to the overall economy, which Bernie Sanders doesn't seem to understand.
You know, interesting observation about that cut. Can you imagine Joe Biden reeling off those statistics like Bernie Sanders just did?
Yeah, no.
I remember when. That would have
Bernie
been bad.
Sanders has been repeating that for a long time, so he's got it. He's got it down.